The incarcerated population in America has been steadily growing since the 1980s. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics in 2016, there were 856,130 juvenile offenders, 2,220,300 adults in either prison or jail, and an additional 4,751,400 on either probation or parole. Many of these offenders have been fed into the criminal justice system through the school-to-prison pipeline, a disturbing national trend wherein children are funneled out of the public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. These children are disproportionately African American, Hispanic, and/or have grown up in poverty. This population interests us because many offenders are raised in environments where criminal behavior is normalized. These kids are not given the opportunity to deal with the violence they have witnessed growing up, allowed to see other non-criminal ways of life, or may have unaddressed issues such as mental health, behavioral, or developmental delays. Offenders are also disproportionately men of color, which makes the growing problem one of systemic racism and oppression.
Can you define how the United States defines the purpose of our juvenile justice system?
You know, that's an odd question because how it defines it and how it practices it are sometimes very different things. But over the last several decades, while at the same time there was kind of a sort of a renewed sort of thrust on sort of punishment type models, there was also a lot of talk about sort of being rehabilitative. There's a problem in that it oftentimes is a little bit sort of dual-minded about exactly what it is and its purpose is. On the one side, you have sort of the kind of the legislative or the kind of the executive branch version of this is what these programs are going to be doing. On the other side, you've got departments that are actually out there on a kind of a day-to-day basis actually working with these juveniles.
When was the first time you got in trouble with the law?
12 years old. 12 years old, I received probation. I completed the probation. Then I got in trouble again when I was 16. Received probation again, completed it. And then I made it until I was 32.
And then you went to prison?
Yes.
What's your idea of the definition of the juvenile justice system? What's its purpose?
Wow. I guess it's to protect the public.
For juveniles?
Yeah. Well, hell yeah.
Well, do you think that its purpose is to punish juveniles and lock them away or to try and intervene?
No, I don't think so, because I did pretty bad things and all they gave me was probation. They saw it. It wasn't a great lawyer that did that. It was the judge asking me questions that were really good questions, and I guess receiving answers that he felt, hey, this kid is not need to be locked up. And I would think that even in a society where we feel that justice is sometimes unfair, I don't think that we lock up kids as often as it's portrayed to be. So I think it happens, but every kid that I've ever known that went to TYC, that was probably a good move for the state to make.
How do you think that incarceration impacts adolescent development and mental health for those that do end up going into the juvenile system?
I think it depends on where they go, who they're around, kind of people they meet. If there are programs available at those places, of course, it's not going to be a positive influence because you're isolated away from people that you need during a period of your life that's centered around growth, emotionally and mentally, especially when you're probably making connections with people on an emotional level that you probably shouldn't be, because you're going to reach out. That's what people do when they're isolated with each other, but away from the things that they know and love.
I assume you're familiar with the school to prison pipeline
Yes.
idea, and can you give us your thoughts on that?
So there are a lot of people out there, right? This has become sort of almost a buzzword right now in kind of juvenile justice sort of areas. And so there's some really neat things that are happening in Texas. For example, it's called the Appleseed Project, or the Appleseed Foundation. And they're doing a lot of work, a lot of research in this particular area, and trying to find out ways to prevent that pipeline from funneling kids, right through the school system, through the disciplinary procedures inside of the school system, and into a more prison-like setting. The real difficulty though is that a lot of what used to be handled informally, or a lot of used to what would be handled in schools, has now been problematized, if not criminalized. Right? And I like using the word problematized a little bit better here, because sometimes we're not necessarily instituting criminal proceedings, but we're instituting those things that are the precursors to.
Similar, yeah.
And in school suspension has consequences. It has consequences for educational development. It probably has consequences for sort of social maturation, but certainly it can be stigmatizing. It can be that sort of thing that kind of customizes a teacher to sort of looking at you and say, oh, she's a problem.
Labeling.
It could lead to a kind of labeling that might, in a future circumstance, where they may have used in school suspension, sort of knowing that history and how it didn't work. Maybe now it becomes an issue for juvenile court. Certainly some of the issues that when you talk about sort of school to prison pipeline, some of the things that you were probably picking up on there is that kind of lack of emotional intelligence, a lack of sort of, positive adaptive coping skills, and actually dealing with, life's omnipresent stressors. And so perhaps if we can address those at an early age, we prepare kids as they become older and as their behavior becomes more serious, or at least as we begin to take it more seriously. Perhaps we were sort of enable them to make decisions that don't bring them to the attention of, school counselors or school resource officers or principals, etc.
Do you think that an open psychoeducational group that offers resources, coping skills, and support to juveniles and their families being available in areas with high crime rates would make a difference in first-time offender rates?
The child's actions are driven by what the parent wants at a young age, because the child has no ability to act for himself because he's a minor. So if your parent is in a life that is centered around drugs and chasing the bag or the next hit that they'll get or whatever it is, if they can't bring their focus off of that enough to even pay attention to you, and I'm not saying that that's what happened to me, then how can you expect them to take time to take their child out to do something like that? They don't feel that anything's wrong, probably in most situations, because that's what they're used to. That's the life that they've built.
So if they decided to implement mandatory attendance of cognitive behavioral in conjunction with probation, do you think that would help?
One thing that we always have to consider is what was the reason why this particular juvenile is standing in front of us today. There will be times when that is absolutely the approach to take, and there will be other times when perhaps it's less suitable for that person. But as a general strategy, it probably is kind of a very useful idea.
But it's not something that you've seen actually done out in the field?
No.
So what would you say was the origin of your trouble with law enforcement?
Never figured it out.
Okay.
I searched long and hard to find the thing that was propelling me to do the things that I did. And out of all the classes that I took and all the techniques and the Franklin reality model and the cumulative addictive cycle and your thinking reports, and I've done all those. I've done so many of them on my own time outside of the forced classes I was doing, attempting to find the thing, whatever it is, whatever that piece of unhappiness was that was making me want to push myself to the edge of the cliff and get as close to it as I could, almost jumping off of it in a way.
Working with this population in the future is important because they are underserved and need advocates to fight for intervention rather than imprisonment, and to help connect them to the resources they need to become productive members of society.